The Comanche dismounted their horses and walked calmly towards the cabin, unaware of Turner's presence. Jeff, enraged by the massacre, kicked the door open, shooting a bullet towards the heart of one of the Comanche warriors, dropping him instantly on the ground. Then, Turner drew his knife from his belt, and like a tiger, he rushed upon the killers mercilessly. The Comanche panicked and tried to flee, while Jeff, enraged, slashed and stabbed every single one of them like a wild animal. He did this until the very same Comanche rifles that killed his family shot him down yards away from their bodies. The Comanche, afraid of other survivors, took some food and fled the scene, leaving Turner choking on his blood. Howdy folks, today we're diving into one of the most brutal stories from the Wild West. We'll uncover the shocking history of Jeff Turner, the Indian hater, a man who was both admired and feared by the Texas Rangers, a man that many people paint as the Wild West Punisher. So sit tight and get ready for this ride through history as we uncover the life of Jeff Turner, the Indian hater. Jeff Turner was born and raised in Kentucky in the early 1800s, a time when the American frontier was expanding rapidly across the continent. With 3 young children, Jeff and his wife never really thought of leaving the bluegrass state. They lived in a modest farmstead with little wealth, however it was just enough to make a decent, peaceful living. One day, a traveler was passing by. He asked the Turners if they could offer him some food and some shelter for the night, a very common practice at the time. At the dinner table, Turner and the traveler were talking about the man's destination. He said he was headed south towards the free and open plains of Texas, a perfect place for farming, ranching, hunting, and fishing. After the traveler was gone the next day, the family returned to their modest farming routine. Jeff Turner, however, could not stop thinking about Texas. His family was happy, comfortable, cozy, and at peace in Kentucky, however, with no abundance. They had just enough food, just enough wealth, a land just good enough for living and farming, everything being just barely good enough. Even though this has sufficed until now, Jeff had no wealth to pass on to his children or his wife upon his demise. For months, this thought haunted Jeff's mind, until one day he decided to sell his farm and move to those free and open plains the traveler was talking about. Convincing his wife was no easy task, but after a couple months, the Turner family settled in Texas, a land filled with promise but also fraught with danger. The vast, untamed wilderness was a battleground where settlers and Native American tribes clashed frequently. For more than 1 century, the Comanche had owned Texas. They had conquered it from the Apache and the Sioux, forcing those tribes north towards the Great Plains or west towards Arizona and New Mexico. The Comanche had also brutalized in many occasions the Spanish, the Mexican settlers, the Shawnee, Cherokee, Waco, Tonkawa, Delaware, and Kickapoo. Native or not, the Comanche would brutalize anyone who crossed them, torturing children, taking women as slaves, concubines, and killing them when no longer of use. For this reason, many settlers were reluctant to move into Texas. But in the 1830s, Jeff convinced his wife to sell their farmstead and move into the Republic of Texas. They had settled on the banks of the Guadalupe River, following its southeasterly course. Jeff, along with his older children, prepared a cabin along with some ground for farming and planting crops. Everything the traveler said was true. The land was rich, beautiful, and Jeff had no trouble feeding his family like he wanted to. After some months, their life was just like the couple had dreamed for so many years. The Turner family was happier than ever. One morning, Jeff went out hunting with his rifle. His children were playing near the river, and his wife was happily singing as she harvested the crops. Jeff took precious time to observe this beautiful scene before leaving. Little did he knew it would be the last time. Jeff Turner was venturing down a small creek in the morning silence when he heard the cursed sound of what sounded like a dozen rifles near his home. Jeff Turner froze in terror before running as fast as he could towards his family. In the wait back that seemed endless, Jeff heard the deafening screams of his wife and children, fading at every minute as the enraging war cries of the enemy became louder and louder. When Turner arrived at his house, he saw the bloodless bodies of his beloved wife and his youngest son, tightly held by her arms. At the back of the house were the bodies of his other children, who had fought fiercely to defend their home, covered in blood and scalped. The Comanche, just after this horrific scene, came back. The Comanche dismounted their horses and walked calmly towards the cabin, unaware of Turner's presence. Jeff, enraged by the massacre, kicked the door open, shooting a bullet towards the heart of one of the Comanche warriors, dropping him instantly on the ground. Then, Turner drew his knife from his belt, and like a tiger, he rushed upon the killers mercilessly. The Comanche panicked and tried to flee, while Jeff, enraged, slashed and stabbed every single one of them like a wild animal. He did this until the very same Comanche rifles that killed his family shot him down yards away from their bodies. The Comanche, afraid of other survivors, took some food and fled the scene, leaving Turner choking on his blood. Later that day, a neighbor was passing by. Suspicious of the silence, he decided to investigate. The man was greeted with a heartbreaking and shocking scene. Blood and bodies everywhere, the Turner family dead, and Jeff unconscious, laying above a Comanche warrior's body, with one of his hands around the man's throat and the other holding a knife stabbed into the warrior's ribs. The neighbor, seeing that Jeff was still breathing, took him out of the cabin, putting him on the back of his horse and riding back to his home in order to provide medical support for Turner. For many weeks, Jeff was haunted by fever dreams and unimaginable pain throughout his body. Even though with great help from his neighbors he managed to heal, his mind would never recover from this day. Jeff, after such a traumatic experience, didn't want people close to him, didn't want to talk to people, so he moved alone to the wilderness of Central Texas. Leaving everything he still had behind, Jeff Turner had a new objective in his life: vengeance. For many years, he spent his days and nights tracking Comanche parties into their own land, a place avoided even by the Texas Rangers, to brutalize them in every way he could, scalping them and exacting revenge for what they had done to his family. Many years later, on a fateful day, Jeff was headed to a nearby settlement to get some supplies. In that same settlement was a group of Texas Rangers who had just walked into town. That same morning, a party of raiding Comanche had stolen their horses, so they were seeking new mounts for their service. After getting some stallions from a humble rancher, they were on the trail of the Comanche party who had stolen their horses. Among this very group was a rookie who would later become a legendary ranger, Bigfoot Wallace, in his early 20s. Wallace's story was told in this other video. You can check it out later. Now, Wallace was still inexperienced and afraid of the incoming conflict. On that same trail, not far away, mounted on an ill-tempered horse, approached a curious man. Tall, spare-built chap dressed in buckskin, hunting shirt and leggings, with a coonskin cap along with an old-fashioned flint and steel Kentucky rifle on his shoulder. He also had a tomahawk and scalping knife stuck in his belt. His hair was matted together and hung around his neck in great uncombed sweeps, and his eyes peered out from among it, as bright as a couple of mesquite coals. That was Jeff Turner, a man totally different from everything the Rangers had ever seen before. In an odd conversation, Jeff told the Rangers his story, with his wild eyes raging and containing himself not to burst out of anger. He told the Rangers he had 46 Comanche scalps hanging in his lodge, hoping to bring them to 100 someday before offering his services as a tracker and killer for the Comanche raiding party. Not because he wanted to help, but because he wanted some more scalps to bring back to his camp. That day, Jeff Turner, the Indian hater, was riding alongside the Texas Rangers. They headed west, and thanks to Jeff's tracking skills, they found the region where the Comanche camp was, the place where Jeff Turner would cement his reputation as a skilled fighter and a legend in Wild West history. Proceeding cautiously through enemy territory, Jeff told the Rangers to watch out for Comanche sentries and to stay silent. They obeyed him because even though they only knew the man for a couple hours, his knowledge of tracking and frontier warfare tactics had impressed them. He was much more experienced than all those Rangers together, so Jeff Turner was leading the Texas Rangers. Once they came into view of the camp, not wanting to lose the element of surprise, they chose to attack immediately. The Comanche, seeing the Texans in about 50 yards, shot a volley of arrows and bullets, and the Texans did the same. They dismounted their horses, and a Comanche's arrow would have got Wallace's head if he had not jumped behind a tree to avoid the incoming threat. Wallace, still inexperienced, missed the shot pointed towards the attacker, and the fight went on for about 20 minutes. As bullets hit their targets and arrows flew around the camp, the still inexperienced Texas Rangers kept looking at Turner for instruction and guidance, but his actions only scared and shocked the young Rangers. With outstanding bloodlust, Turner moved quickly and skillfully, shooting, reloading, lifting the hair of a dead Comanche, and scalping him in seconds, covered in blood, disappearing and reappearing in the battleground. The fluidness in which he kept doing this was impressive. It looked like he had done this hundreds, maybe thousands of times. This was the skill of Jeff Turner. After this battle, Turner bade farewell to the Rangers and went on to his lodge to hang more scalps on his wall, and they never met him again. It's said that after a couple years, the Comanche finally caught Jeff sleeping in a camp in South Texas. They knew him and saw him as a legendary warrior, someone who, according to their culture, would provide his power and skill to any warrior that ate his heart, the place where his war gifts and power would be stored. They took him to the chief's lodge in their camp, where besides the chief was his pregnant wife. He examined Turner, was beaten and slashed to the ground, and ordered the Comanche to start the ritual. Jeff remained silent and distant throughout the ceremony, maybe thinking about his family. In the end, the chief pulled a hunting knife and dismembered Turner. He removed his heart, fed it to his pregnant wife, and burned Turner's remains. However, other people say that Jeff met his end in a cave, stung by a snake, or concealed from a Comanche party. Whether Turner died in a Comanche ritual, in a cave, or in a third situation, it's likely that he met his end doing what defined him: hunting, tracking, and fighting the Comanche. Turner's story is one of complexity and contradiction. He was both a product of his time and a figure who left an indelible mark on history. His relentless pursuit of revenge, while driven by personal tragedy, mirrored the larger conflicts of the American frontier, where cultures clashed and survival was paramount. His interactions with Bigfoot Wallace and his notable battles highlight the strategic mind and fierce determination that made him a formidable figure. Thank you for riding along with us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales from the wild, wild west. And always remember, folks, to keep your boots dusty, your spirits high, and I'll see you on the next time.